Good evening and welcome to the McGill Money Talks for Docs webinar series, COVID-19 edition. I'm very happy to bring this to you this evening. I'm Benjamin Burko, a proud graduate of McGill Medical Class of '88 and a pediatrician here in Montreal. This series was born out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention. And although we all as medical and dental professionals who are joining us, by the way, this evening from Ontario and Quebec, and welcome to all of you, this series was born out of really the need for good, sound financial education. It's quite amazing that all of us have been given the gift of a fabulous education and the ability to have very satisfying and fulfilling careers and the ability to earn some very nice incomes as well. But we were never given the financial information that we were needed to steward any of this. And I realized that in speaking to colleagues over the years, and hence this series came about. It is a completely voluntary initiative. It's done under the auspices of the McGill Alumni Association, and we thank them for letting us put this on. There have been sponsorship fees paid by our speakers this evening, and we're happy to use those fees towards projects of the Faculty of Medicine that would otherwise not be possible. Without further ado, I'll get started by introducing our speakers this evening. We have three wonderful speakers from Asante Capital Management, and they are Jeremy Hampson, who's had over 25 years of experience as a financial advisor. He's developed the ability to simplify and explain even the most complex of financial strategies, and I know that because he's explained them to me. His patience and intuitive emotional style are greatly appreciated by clients from all walks of life. Jeremy is a certified financial professional planner and also holds a chartered life underwriter designation, both of which demonstrate his extensive knowledge in insurance law, insurance taxation, and advanced estate planning solutions. He provides advice and strategies on the integration of insurance solutions into his clients' planning. Jeremy is also actively involved in charity work in the community for intellectually handicapped people. He sits on the board of directors of two West Island charities and is also the vice chair of the Montreal chapter of the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. Jeremy works very closely with a number of important charities in Montreal via the Donor Motivation Program. Olivier Brasseur is a graduate of the John Molson School of Business with a Bachelor of Finance. Olivier is pursuing his financial planning designation at present. He has achieved all investment and insurance of person brokerage credentials to practice Canada-wide. Olivier joined Asante as an associate in 2015, growing up in his own family's business, and Olivier has accumulated acute knowledge of the financial world from a very young age. He is passionate about helping the next generation of entrepreneurs, medical professionals, and families of wealth with all financial aspects of their lives. He also volunteers his time to the Canadian Cancer Society and for the Students' Association of Management Faculties of Eastern Canada, for which he has previously held a board position. Earl Kaplin is a senior financial planner who has spent the last 35 years assisting high net worth families managing their financial affairs. He focuses on helping his clients achieve their personal financial goals, minimizing their taxes, and preserving their capital. His expertise includes tax, estate, and succession planning. Earl graduated with a Bachelor of Commerce from Concordia University and was one of the first certified financial planners in Canada. He's not that old, folks, but he was one of those. He also holds the Canadian Investment Management designation. Prior to joining Asante Wealth Management, Earl was a senior partner with DPM, one of the largest financial planning firms in Canada in the 90s. In 1998, he was instrumental in DPM's merger with Asante Wealth Management, where he then served as a board member during its preparation for an initial public offering. And without further ado, I will hand the floor over to you, Earl.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for our first Money Talks for Docs webinar. As Ben mentioned, we have been running this series in person for a couple of years now. However, given the current situation, this is our first shot at doing it online. So please forgive any glitches if they should crop up. We're not familiar with this, but we'll try our best. Our objective this evening is to provide you some basic information while answering the questions most frequently asked in our practice over the last few months. as well as some of those that you submitted as part of the registration process. Thank you for sending those in. They did help us organize to make sure we'll give you the right information that you want tonight. We hope to provide you with some perspective on the state of global financial affairs, some tools to help you better manage the situation. Later on in the session, we'll respond to additional questions from you. So please send those to specialevent.med@mcgill.ca. I think you should see that right below my name or on the YouTube description. So this link should be appearing there all through the session. Should we not have enough time to answer all your questions or queries that are more individual in nature, if they're a little bit more specific as opposed to generic, with McGill's permission, we'll respond to you directly after the conclusion of this event. Or if you prefer, you could reach out to us directly at www.kaplinhampson.com or our email. I think it was at the beginning and at the end of the session. We do hope to run some more of these clinics over the next few months, so please do provide us with feedback and suggestions for content ideas, either through a response survey that we'll send out after this seminar is over, or to the McGill email below, or just straight to our website, and we'll try to tailor these as well as we can over the next few months. So we hope you find the next hour to be worthwhile and look forward to hearing from you on how we can make the next one even better. Back to you, Ben, because I think you've got some questions lined up.
Yeah, thank you, Earl. And I'm sure it will be worthwhile. What's very interesting about this lecture is that it was actually driven, Earl, all by end user or doctors and dentists questions. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the first one, which is actually from it was a common question from some young professionals who are just starting out. And they asked, what are the first steps and then what are the next steps?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. And it's actually a great first question. As I would say, it's an interesting take, especially in the current context, as it's been probably one of the most frequently asked questions, or a variation thereof recently from new investors, especially from residents or from early practitioners. This crisis has created a lot of what I would call false start bias, a lot of anxiety given COVID financially. There is this massive fear of having missed out, especially for new investors, of having missed out or missed a beat or missed the boat when it comes to investing. So there's this rush to the market, and it's actually seen industry-wide, not so much as to the inflows of money that are coming in, but as so much as the number of new retail investors. We're seeing record numbers of accounts being opened up. Now that's basically being driven by two things. So that fear of missing out and that kind of call to action and rush, which is a good thing. Information regarding investing is more out there than ever in our daily lives. There's information everywhere, easily facilitated by the other flip side. The second thing is technology. Technology is facilitating this process. It's easier more than ever to open up an account and trade stocks on a virtual platform from the comfort of your iPhone and in your living room. So there is that happening.
Well, Olivier, isn't technology a good thing? Like all this easy access to information, it's so easy to invest now. Yeah,
so agreed 100% to what you're saying. It is a good way it is easier to invest now. However, technology and the overload of information when it comes to investing in financial planning is a double-edged sword. And that's where we often see a problem, because it's all great and promising, but there's a major flaw and an important disconnect that happens. We're overwhelmed with information. There's an overload of noise, generalities, and it's now easy to press a button and hit the trigger and then buy some investment that don't necessarily fit what you should be focusing on. So it's really to recenter and focus on your personal situation. So to go back to the original question, what's the first piece of advice or the first step? The first step is, before anything else, determine your needs, your financial objectives, and your financial goal. That should very, very be your first step. That's the most important point. What are you trying to achieve? And the answer to that question shouldn't be get rich quick. That's unfortunately too easy and ultimately not realistic. You should set up goals, and ideally, if you've got times on your hand now, especially given the situation, set up goals that are what we call SMART. So they've got to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant or reasonable, and also time-based. So you really want to focus on having those goals properly set up, both short, medium, and longer term.
You're speaking of specific, to young people, just young doctors or dentists just starting out, earning their first dollars. One of the things I struggled with was when to incorporate, and even just knowing how to set up a practice. How does that all work? When's the right time?
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, I'll start by going back to your financial objective and getting as precise as possible with those. Oftentimes, one of the biggest mistakes we see from young doctors is that they see incorporation as a goal. It shouldn't be a goal in itself. It's really more of a means to an end. So before that, you should start by laying out your financial objectives and financial goals. And one of those financial goals, for most people, it's you want to save a certain amount of money for retirement. So that's specific. You could be even more specific by saying, I want to save at least $3 million for retirement and sustain $120,000 of income in retirement. So there you've got the reasonableness and the measurableness of the goal. And how are you going to do so? And in order to achieve that, you're going to have to save $75,000 a year over the next 30 years or so before retirement. So there you finally got the time-based and is it achievable? So now that you've got that well-defined goal, that's when the question of incorporation comes in. So really, to just reiterate at the risk of repeating myself, establish your short, medium, and long-term goals. And that's really the frame, the skeleton. And then next, you can work towards the following step of adding more meat. And that's where incorporation will come in. Because ultimately, and I want to make a little caveat here, the question of incorporating or not when it comes into play, to make the distinction, there's only one real valuable reason for physicians and doctors to incorporate early in their career. And it's when your income greatly surpasses your outflows or your consumptions and expenses. So when you're able to save a lot of money, and that for the next foreseeable future, that's when it makes sense. So I want to just make a little parenthesis here that for doctors that can own their practice and own their patient and eventually sell their patient. So I'm speaking more to dentists here where they can own clinics. In those cases, it also makes sense to incorporate. But otherwise, as a physician, if you're in a spending mode and all your money is going towards your mortgage and towards your expenses, and you're not really saving massive amount, incorporation won't make a lot of sense. And to just sum it up, if you're just starting out or don't try to play the intricacies day-to-day of the markets or trying to time things, bring back the focus on what matter. And that's really to go back to the original question, what's the first step is establish your financial goal. You've got times on your hand now during this crisis, rather than trying to open up a brokerage account and play with your $5,000 and make a lot of money quickly. You should list your financial goal. That's a much better use of your time and ultimately will set you further along the way. Start with the end in mind. Knowing where you're going will allow you to take the proper steps and proper financial decisions. And last but not least, for student and residents, it's not a set a plan once and that will carry you through retirement. Really, you got to always keep that focus in mind, focus on the decades and not focus on the day-to-day, but realize that investing and financial planning is a process in which you've got to spend time on it over the years. So you got to get involved over the years.
Well, you just mentioned retirement, and we definitely have three different segments tuned in today. And one of those segments are people that are, thinking about winding down, and they wanted to know really what are the next moves, especially in this market.
Okay, well, I'll handle that one. I think the part of the population who has been most affected by the effects of this pandemic are those people who are either retired who are just approaching retirement. The rapidity of the spread of this virus and the rapid drop in the financial markets have really shown us how fragile our economic and financial lives can be. So what should you be doing? Well, first and foremost, what you really need to have is clarity on your financial situation. Now, what do I mean by that? You need to be sure that you have sufficient assets and sources of income that you're financially independent. Financial independence is defined as no longer having to depend on earning an income to meet your daily, weekly, or monthly outflow of expenses. How can you be sure of this? Well, basically that starts with an in-depth comprehensive financial analysis or a stress test of your financial situation. Now, most people that I come across are really focused on their investment returns or the fees that they are paying. Now, while this is very, very important, it actually misses the one fundamental or overriding question in all of this. Do I have enough, or will I have enough? Because ultimately, working towards the goal of financial independence and working because you want to, not because you have to, that's the goal of everyone as they're getting close to slowing down. So how do we figure this out? How do we establish it? Well, the very first thing that we need to do is we need to determine how much money you need to maintain your lifestyle. Secondly, then we're going to look at the different sources of income that you have, and whether that is pensions, fixed pensions, private pensions, or sufficient assets that are going to generate an income to maintain that lifestyle line. Now, as you can see on this little graph there, that lifestyle line is actually increasing every year. Now, that doesn't mean that you are necessarily spending more each year in retirement. That's actually reflecting the effect of inflation. So for an average 65-year-old couple in Canada, there's a 50% chance that one of those two is going to live to the age of 90. So basically spending 25 years in retirement. Now, the reality is inflation historically has run at about 3% a year on average. So over 25 years, the effects of inflation will mean you're going to need double the amount of money to maintain your lifestyle. So in your first year of retirement, if you need $125,000 a year to maintain your lifestyle, 25 years later, you're going to need $250,000. So once we've done that, then what we do is we stress test that financial model. So what that means is we're going to shock the system. We're going to model large market downturns, perhaps interruptions in cash flow, additional expenses, to make sure that the plan is sustainable, that it is successful. Once that is all done, fortunately, if the plan is successful, then we can look at a number of different what ifs. What if I was to retire a few years earlier? What if I want to spend more in retirement? Or the flip side of that is if that plan isn't successful, what can I do? Should I defer retirement? Should I save more? Should I defer some of my other large purchases that I have in mind?
Jeremy, when is the right time to actually make one of these plans and to do one of these stress tests?
Theoretically, everyone should have one of these plans right from the word go, okay? Because it's like having a roadmap. So the best analogy of that is, if you can imagine as a Montrealer, you decide that you want to go to Florida in the winter. Well, you know what? You can hop in your car, you can cross the Champlain Bridge, and you can head south. And with a little bit of luck, you're going to end up in Florida. But it would be far simpler if you actually had a roadmap and a planned route to get there. The reality is if you don't have one of these plans and you are 55 plus, or you're perhaps within 10 to 15 years of retirement, it's critical that you get one of these plans done now, because that will give you enough time to adapt your planning so that hopefully you can reach financial independence.
So, I know and I've spoken to young people, younger investors, and they always ask opinions about who to invest with and how to invest. But where do you actually get one of these plans?
Okay, well, you know what? The internet is littered with them. You can just go. You can go there into Google and you can search for a financial planning software. But the reality is the software that you will get for free or via Google probably isn't going to be robust enough. So you should be talking to a competent financial advisor, whether that is at a bank, at a brokerage, another financial institution, because they have that software at their fingertips. But the one caveat in that is you need to make sure that that plan has something called a Monte Carlo simulation. And that is critical. The Monte Carlo simulation is actually a randomization of investment returns. So most of us, when we think about planning, we say, okay, my portfolio is going to get an average 5% rate of return for the next 25 years. Well, as we all know, rates of return don't come in nice numbers like 5, 5, 5, 5. They tend to come at minus 20, plus 7. And then over time, it will average out to 5. So this Monte Carlo simulation randomizes all of those returns to give you an average. And what that does is it tests for situations like today, if you were just about to retire and the market drops 20%, will you have enough money to be successful?
Well, speaking of the market dropping 20% and going up 20%, all kind of in the same week, the most common question I think that we received was the following, which is the stock markets are going crazy. Is this the right time to buy or to sell?
This is funny enough. When things run smoothly and financial markets are in growth modes and there's no COVID-19 around, we never get that question. But you are right. This is the one that we've got asked the most. Very, very popular at this time, obviously. I think it ultimately boils down to trying to time the market. That's what people are trying to do. But in reality, should you follow a strict plan, one should never really attempt to do market timing. It's been actually shown that being invested or staying invested is far more important than trying to get in or to know when to get in or get out. And there's this old expression that says time in the market, staying invested is better than trying to time the market, trying to get it right. And the reality is when people don't, and then they try to time invest, the issue is that they'll fall victim to their emotion and to the cycle of greed and fear. They'll buy high, they'll sell low, letting emotions guide their decisions and not sticking with the plan or the facts. So a bit earlier when I was mentioning the adrenaline of the youth rushing to the markets because they're seeing this as an opportunity, in the current circumstances, we're seeing that. But we also see on the flip side, the euphoria when things start bubbling up. Recall the wheat stocks, the Bitcoin or the tech stocks for the ones that are a little older. Those were all situations where we've got massive influx of greed or fear leading to emotional responses and people making costly financial mistakes. So the question should be approached objectively, relationships to your goal, and very factually.
Yeah. Olivier, all that's good and fine, but you're looking at some of the market's darling stocks tanking, and it's a distressed market. These stocks are now available at a discount. Isn't this the time to buy?
Yeah, absolutely, and agreed. You're right. It is the time to buy if you've got substantial assets sitting on the sideline. That being said, so you need the cash on the side and ready to invest. Because otherwise, 12 months ago, I would have said it was time to invest. Because the reality is you should never build up surplus cash in your bank account or savings unless it's to go towards a short-term goal or a short-term project or short or medium-term project. So if you do have substantial assets or cash now in the bank, yes, it's worth looking into starting to invest now and buying it now more than ever, probably. But if that money was earmarked for a cottage or a new car in 6 months' time, likely a very bad idea to go in and buy those stocks at a discount thinking in 6 months you're going to have made a lot of profit. Reality is that your long-term money or assets that you're using towards retirement or longer-term projects, you should always keep them invested. It's okay to keep liquidities for short-term, medium-term, into conservative investments. But other than that, and for the long-term assets, you should hold long-term investments. So that being said, if you're in the saving stage, you should adopt a strategy. So rather than trying to time the market, there's a strategy or concept called dollar cost averaging, which means every month when you receive your surplus, you're actually investing them in. And what that does is that ultimately on the long term, it's effectively the best way to achieve an average and avoid taking the risk of timing. By having that plan and investing every surplus on a monthly basis into an investment that fits your goal, you're never faced with that too common problem that we see a lot of people hoarding cash, building these massive reserves, and then in times of panic or cycles of fear and greed, they're stuck making drastic decisions to buy, and that creates a lot of issues. Now, the flip side to that argument can be made with selling. If you have an investment with long-term objectives, you shouldn't be selling more than you need. So for those of you that are in retirement and maybe a little more worried, you should, if you're drawing income from your portfolio, you should keep doing this for the same reason, because you're dollar cost averaging on the flip side. And therefore, you keep your withdrawals, you keep going, and your portfolio is still actively working for you in the long term. You got to keep in mind for the retirees that this crisis is short term, and odds are in front of you, you still have 10, 15 plus years of retirement. For the larger purchases, if you do have substantial fund sitting on the side, then it's good. But for larger purchases, if you're planning to withdraw from your investment portfolio to buy a cottage or buy a car, obviously might be a little better to avoid touching those at this point. Now, there's another reason to sell, another few situations where it makes sense. And I think Jeremy, maybe you want to touch on that reason.
Okay, sure. So Ollie's sort of covered this topic from the 30,000 foot level or the macro level. So maybe I'll drill down a little bit and get to the nuts and bolts, the details. I think it's fair to say that if we're talking about COVID-19, no one can agree on the direction of the virus or the treatment protocol. So where does that leave us in terms of our investment portfolios? So there's some very concrete steps that you could be taking to improve your current situation or perhaps your future situation. And probably the most important one right now is actually to take the time to analyze your portfolio and make sure that it is structured to achieve what your objectives are. And if it is, or perhaps if it's not, it's time to rebalance now and restructure. It's also a great time to do some tax loss selling.
Just to remind all of you, we have all kinds of levels of investors tuned in today, from novices and non, all the way to seasoned people. So could you just go over the term? What is that tax loss selling? Who should be doing tax loss selling?
Great question, Ben. So tax loss selling occurs when you have investments that are in a non-registered account. So not your RSP, not your tax-free savings account. So outside of those types of accounts, or in a corporate investment account inside your holdco or your operating company. So if you have bought investments and today they are worth less than what you actually paid for them, you can sell them and realize a capital loss. Capital losses are like money in the bank. They can be used to reduce your income tax now, or they can actually be carried forward to the future to offset future gains. The goal behind tax loss selling is to get the tax benefit of a short-term loss on those investments and then keep the money invested for the longer term.
So you get the proceeds of your tax loss sale. Now, where do you put it? Do you have any recommendations of where to invest?
Okay, well, this type of forum, I can't give anyone specific investment advice without knowing what their risk tolerance is, what their objectives. And furthermore, I honestly have absolutely no clue what is going to happen in the market next week, next month, or even a year from now. And if you're talking to someone who is telling you that they know, run in the opposite direction. Absolutely no one knows. But this doesn't mean that you can't reassess your portfolio today and position yourself to be in the right place 2, 3, 4 years out. So the remarkable thing about human beings is we adapt. And whatever the world is going to look like in the future, we will make a go of it and make a successful run of things. But when it comes to investing, there are a few things that we do know right now. interest rates are at zero or pretty close to it, which means your safest investments, your bank accounts, your GICs, government bonds, are going to basically give you little to no return. And if you factor in tax and inflation on them, you're probably going to lose money. Now, this doesn't mean that you should not have these types of investments in your portfolio, because they do form the very basis, the foundation of a good portfolio. However, you may want to speak to your advisor about looking at secure investments that do give you a little bit better yield than zero. Secondly, you may want to consider investing outside of Canada. Now, that may sound unpopular. As good Canadians, as good Quebecers, Ontarians, we need to support local businesses. But the reality is, from an investment perspective, Canada represents about 2 to 3% of world markets. There's not a lot of diversification. There's not a lot of opportunities in Canada. So you may want to look outside of Canada to the US or to global markets, because there will be more opportunity there. And thirdly, we want to look to the future, okay? The world has changed. Social interactions are limited. We're using technology. I mean, all of us have used Zoom, as we are tonight, House Party, FaceTime, Teams to run our everyday life. So the same type of thing can be applied to how you look at your portfolio. Where are the markets going to be? What businesses are going to probably be the most successful in the next couple of years, or who stands to benefit as we come out of this economic crisis? And there's some very easy sectors to pick off. Technology is going to be one of them. Healthcare is going to be another one. Alternative energies. So these are all parts of the market that are probably going to recover more quickly and stand to do a little bit better as we move into this post-pandemic world.
So let's say I needed some money in the next 2 to 3 years, medium term. What should I be thinking about?
Okay, so if you need money in the next 2 to 3 years, as Ollie said before, really you're going to need to have money in cash. So I'm speaking now probably to people who are just starting out, or the people who are approaching retirement. A well-structured portfolio should actually have almost 3 separate buckets of investment holdings. For those people who are in retirement, you probably need at least a year's worth of expenses sitting in cash in the bank account. It's the stuff that is going to earn you zero, but there's going to be absolutely no risk to it. And then you're probably going to need 2 to 3 years worth of money that is in very short-term, high-yielding investments. So that if you need the money in the next 2 to 3 years, if the financial markets recover really quickly, well, then that's great. You can sell some of your long-term investments and realize the cash that you need. But if things take 3 years to recover, you're going to have the money available set aside for you there to spend.
So why don't we switch gears right now and forget about investing, and let's talk about financial security for the family. Is the family safe? How do we know that? How do we ensure it?
Okay, well, I think the simplest way of saying that is financial planning or wealth management is more than just talking about stocks and bonds. There are some other very important parts of your planning that need to be addressed on a regular basis. Taking care of your family means planning for the unexpected, or planning for critical financial events. Human beings are predominantly optimistic, as I said before. And when we make plans, they tend to look like that little flag there, which is our objective, and a straight line to get there. But the reality is life looks something a little bit more like that picture on the bottom there. And I think it's safe to say that we are living in one of those hiccups right now.
So are you talking about wills and estate plans?
Very definitely. So The statistics is that 50% of Canadians actually don't have a will. So if you're in that cohort and you're listening today, you need to get a will done immediately. If you don't, and something happens to you, you are leaving an absolute financial mess for your family. Can't say it any more clearly than that. But hopefully or happily, maybe I'm talking to the 50% of people who do have a will. Now, that doesn't mean that you're off the hook. What I need you to do is actually pull out that will and see what it says. Because all too often when I ask clients what their will says, and then when I actually read it, it says two different things. What they think it says, what it says are polar opposites. So you're going to want to make sure that what your will says is actually what you think it does, and that it matches your current wishes.
Now, you've advised me, Jeremy, to actually discuss this stuff with my family in advance. Seems creepy. Is that still advice that holds true?
Oh, yes. You kidding me? In times like these, it's absolutely critical. Your family needs to know what your intentions are. They need to know about your will. They need to know where to find it at the very least. And another critically important thing that you can do is actually jot down a net worth statement. It doesn't have to be tremendously detailed, but a summary of where your assets are, where your debts are, everything that you own, you owe. If you have a safety deposit box, where is it? You may even want to go as far as passwords. Or if you deal with a financial advisor, put his or her number down there. And if you've done that and you've got parents, pick up the phone, call mom and dad, and ask them that same question. Ask them if they have a will. What does it say? Where is it? And if they've named you as the executor, quick, ask them to change it.
I'm still a bit uncomfortable with some of the information in a pre-discussion mode. I find it all like very private. Do you have any advice?
Okay, it really is private. You don't have to disclose everything. But the thing is having that information for someone at their fingertips or knowing where to find it is going to make an estate settlement situation far, far simpler. And I can speak from personal experience. Settling my father's estate, even though it was well set up, it was set up by me, it is still a difficult process to go through that is confusing and complicated. So you need to have those things done. And also another thing that is really, really important is you need to think about what we call the what if I don't die documents, okay? These are the ones that we least like to talk about, but today in this pandemic are critically important. We're seeing and hearing constantly the effects of this virus and how sudden and dramatic those effects can be. So ask yourself, have you told your loved ones what your wishes are for treatment in the event that you cannot speak for yourself? Do you have a protective mandate that outlines how your treatment should be? These are often called living wills. If you don't, talk to your spouse, talk to your partner, tell them what you want. You could also get an advanced medical directive done. You can go online and register that with RAMQ. And obviously for the people that I'm talking to today who are frontline, whether you are a physician or you are a dentist, you're frontline in this. So you want to make sure that these things are in order. You really don't want to be the cordonnier mal chaussé. And for our Ontario participants, you don't want to be a shoemaker without shoes.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the roles of insurance at this time. Saw some very distressing pieces on CNN of 27-year-old doctors heading into the emergency room and never thought about life insurance ever in their lives before, and taking out policies under duress. Can you even get these things at this time and under these circumstances? And what are the right products?
Okay. So the answer is yes, you can get life insurance right now. There are certain forms of insurance which are called guaranteed issue, and depending on your age and your health status, you can actually get life insurance just by filling out an application and answering a couple of medical questions. You don't actually need a medical test. For who are a little bit older and may have some medical issues, actually, if you had an insurance medical or a full medical done by a physician in the last 12 months, insurance companies will accept those currently. So you can go out and get insurance presently. If you've already got insurance, this is a great time, again, like I said with the will, to pull it out. Make sure that you've got enough insurance. Check who your beneficiaries are on your insurance. Does it match what it says in your will? And actually, in preparing for this presentation, we did get a question about, should I buy more insurance now, more than I actually need? Well, it's an interesting question because insurance companies will not sell you more insurance than you actually need. You need to have an insurable interest. So if you are making $400,000 a year as a dentist or as a physician, you want to apply for a $30 million life insurance policy, the insurance company is not going to give it to you. But you can definitely go and get some insurance now. And one of the things that is very, very interesting, and not everybody knows, insurance is a fantastic investment vehicle, especially in times like these. Everybody is worried about the financial markets and how much the TSX has gone down and how much their portfolio has gone down. But there are some unique, what are called permanent life insurance policies that actually give you rates of return of 5 or 6% a year and are not affected by market downturns. So that is something that you should be looking into, especially at times like these.
Some folks have said that they've found the places to buy insurance online. What's your opinion about that versus speaking to a professional such as yourself?
Okay, well, online works. You can buy insurance through Costco if you want, and you end up going through Manulife Insurance. My advice would be is you really need someone to do an analysis for you to tell you how much is enough. It's very, very easy to sell insurance the way people used to do 30 years ago. You basically paint this picture of a big, digging a big hole next to your client and pushing them in it. And the insurance policy is the ladder to get them back out of that hole. You really want to make sure that you have the right amount of insurance and the right type of insurance. So it is critical that you talk to someone who does have some expertise.
So what other value do you get? You know, so somebody's going to advise you, maybe they'll take you out for a nice lunch or something, but what's the real value of this person as opposed to a great website to buy from?
Yeah, if I can jump in here, Jeremy, I think it's actually a very good question. I think to really quantify the value of advice is very, very difficult, but that assessment can be done. And I think it's being done 3 ways. So unfortunately, the downside to it would be that it needs time and commitment. But you can essentially assess the value of advice that you're getting 3 ways. So A, are you achieving or exceeding the financial goals that you set out for yourself in a timely manner and according to plan? So if you had goals 2-3 years down the road and you're actually hitting those targets, it means you're probably receiving the right advice. Are you hitting the return objectives on the investments? Obviously, that usually will take a little bit more time. So those 2 points are a little longer. You'll need to have a relationship there for 3-5 years. And then ultimately, the third point is, what is your time worth? And that I think you can assess right from the get-go. Are you saving precious time? As a physicians and as dentists, your time is valuable. And are you avoiding the big costly mistake? The flip side of making big gains, on the flip side, are you making gains or being advised or having recommendations that are actually putting you further ahead? Yeah.
And as far as I understand the industry, insurance brokers basically are commissioned salespeople. So how can you really trust the advice that you're being given?
I think you need to make sure of a couple of things. So A, that you're dealing with professionals who have the credentials and are dealing with reputable firms. I think you don't know, we're talking about insurance brokers, but it could be your fiscalist, it could be your accountant, it could also be, your financial planner, I'll say. So ideally, they'll have titles, professional designations that are out there and commonly known. But dealing now, especially in financial instruments with financial markets, it's very, very important that you deal with a reputable firm that has the backing of the different authorities, and so that these individuals are regulated. So you want to deal with, going back to what we do to financial planners a little bit more. You need to make sure that that person has their CFP or financial planning designation of some sort. And remember, one thing is that unlike the healthcare system where you cannot choose your doctor, when it comes to your finances, you can choose the professionals that you're going to deal with. And so you have the ultimate flexibility there to spend the time to shop your professional. Information is out there on Google. They should have a presence online for sure. And then you can see, you can look at their background. Friends and family also help. So people that you know, or referrals from people that they're dealing with. So that also helps, making sure they're reputable. I think that's a way to know. One little thing that I want to put on is the value of advice. We often get it, and in fact, what's the value of advice? I'm paying these fees. What am I getting in return? I could do this. I often got it where, I could do this all myself. There's tools online that I can do this for free, and I could go on and on and on, and rather than paying the 1% per year, famous 1%, that would compound to X% over the years. I could do this myself and probably be better off for cheaper. Well, the reality is that it's been shown that families dealing with financial advisors over time will accumulate more wealth. And matter of fact, I think it's 3.9 more money than individuals who deal with no financial advisors or no advice whatsoever. And to go back to the argument that, I could do this all myself and save on the fees, that's also somewhat flawed because they're discounting the value of advice completely. In reality, when there's studies out there, and there was a study recently that said that for the 1% paid in fees to financial advisors, the clients were gaining about 3% more per year. And that's being achieved through various things. So they've got proper tax planning. So they're avoiding the big mistakes. There's proper rebalancing into their portfolio and proper risk management. So they've got the right insurance in place. So they've got a right plan in place. And usually an advisor will curb out the emotional aspect of investing or other stuff. And they'll help you set out the proper objective and planning in place. So, I think there is value in advice.
Well, how much money should somebody have in order to actually think about the process of starting to engage a financial planner? How much, do they need as a base?
The answer is zero. I think that's also a misconception amongst the industry where people are kind of shy and thinking, I can't afford this. I need to wait till I'm in the $1 million bracket or till I've accumulated a lot of wealth. And that's unfortunately sad because people will accumulate a lot of money and it will take them 10, 15 years, whereas it could have taken them 10 years had they been advised from the get-go. So I think there's no minimum. It's really a matter of fit and your goals. Do you like that person that you're dealing with? Do you feel comfortable? I think are the primary things. And remember that advice, it works both ways. And for you to derive maximum value, you need to commit to the relationship. Much like a patient-doctor relationship, as professional, we need a maximum amount of information in order for us to make hypothesis, establish a diagnosis, and then eventually make proper recommendations. So it's really, when you're looking for advice, it's to engage into that process.
Are you talking about like one key person, or do I need a tax lawyer, an investment planner, a whole separate retirement and wealth planner, a different insurance person for the risk piece?
You're absolutely right that there are specialists out there, and then forms of advice will come from different sources. But there are comprehensive financial advisors, especially in the high net worth segment, and for medical professionals. I'm sure we're not the first people that you hear about or talk to. There's plenty of people in Montreal, in Ontario, doing this. So when talking about advice and seeking it, if you got to be, what we call in our practice, you got to be looking for this concept that we've labeled the trusted advisor. Someone who you feel comfortable with and who's got a big picture approach. And I would compare this to relate it to you, not to your specialists or to specialist practitioners. You compare this to your generalist or your hospitalist. That's someone who will be able to triage the information for you and put all the pieces together. So they don't necessarily have a specific or very acute knowledge of the tax specialist, but at least they can relate and talk their language. And then what they can do is have a big picture approach to your situation, and then guide you to the various specialists when there's specialty needed.
This audience that you're speaking to right now is a bunch of highly educated, highly trained, scientific people that have managed to master mountains of knowledge. Can't we just train ourselves to become that generalist?
Yes, I think absolutely you could. Should that be your primary passion and focus, and should you be willing to spend the time learning, researching and staying atop news, novelties, and changes, yes, you can become the expert. I think, it's a little foolish for young doctors or very, very early in their practice to think they know it all right away in terms of finances. I think it's really the process. I think, Ben, speaking for you, you're very savvy and very knowledgeable when it comes to finances, but I think it's knowledge that you've gathered over the years, over time, by being, I think the key component there is, you're involved into the relationships that you have with your professional, and you're willing to spend the time and effort. It's not a daily thing, but you're looking and taking care of your stuff as you go along. So I think that's really how you become an expert for medical professionals. That being said, I really doubt that there are a lot of physicians or dentists out there where it's worth your time and money to actually spend the 10, 15 hours a week that it would require you to become the expert. I think you're probably better off from just a passion standpoint, obviously, because I'm sure you prefer reading medical stuff than reading financial stuff. And from the monetary angle too, your earning dollars are probably more worthwhile of your time. So rather, the twist there is I would say you should become involved in the process and gather knowledge over time. Starting early is key. And if you've never done so, we've met people that started at 60 and became very involved. And a couple of years in, they finally understand what they've got and what they're doing.
So, Ollie, I don't mean to interrupt, and I hope you finished that thought. We only have about 5 minutes left, and there are a couple of questions that have been coming in since we've been speaking, and I wanted to get to one of them. Earl, I think this one might be up your alley, because I know we've discussed this stuff before. The current housing market and the post-pandemic housing market, is it favorable now? Do you think it's going to be favorable in a few months? And if somebody who's planning on purchasing a home in the next 2 to 3 years, when's the right time to start looking?
Well, interesting. Thank you, Ben. Well, currently stats, they're only showing very limited impact on house prices so far. But the longer this uncertainty drags on, the greater the impact is going to become. And, through this, there's unfortunately going to be individuals, families that for various reasons, some of them not very nice, they're going to be into situations where they're going to actually have to sell their housing. And while it's not a situation I'd wish on anybody, it's a situation that will create buying opportunities. And the longer this drags on for, the more of those will come out, and that'll eventually come through in the statistics. So if you are thinking about buying a house, my recommendation now, get your research done now, know what you want, know what you can afford, so you can be in the position to make an offer at any time. Do your research, look at stuff, watch prices. It's a lot of this stuff is online. every day, watch the markets, and just wait for the right opportunity to find that place that you want. And maybe you're going to get a great deal, maybe you're going to get a good deal. But I can say that over time, prices are going to go up.
So on the non-domestic side, a number of dentists had written into us to ask if now is the right time to take advantage of the markets and actually purchase a dental clinic. What do you think, Earl?
That's even more interesting. There's, I was talking about situations where housing is going to be affected. Well, there's, as you know, dentists are being very strongly affected by the situation right now. And there'll be some that may just want to close out their clinics. They've had enough. They've got enough money saved. They have a good plan in order. Why keep going now when, it's very difficult to make an income as a dentist these days, and we don't know how long it's going to go on for. Hopefully very soon. I don't have any cavities, but hopefully just keep it that way. So, situations might come up, but for any businesses right now, it's actually a very interesting time to be buying a business. A dental clinic is a business. Interest rates are, as Jeremy said, they're next to zero right now, very, very low. And if you're borrowing money to buy a business, the interest expense, even that low interest expense, it's a deduction against your taxes. So if you are looking at it, you look for the opportunities. There will be opportunities now if you want to expand your clinic. This could be a very good time to be looking at it. One caveat: make sure that you have enough emergency money, reserves, to carry you through for 6 months to a year, because it might take a while to rebuild that business up to a profitable level.
Good point, Earl. Jeremy, I got this one in and I texted it to you during the talk. I don't know if you had time to think about an answer. It was about all the provincial and federal money that's around and what might be their fiscal impact.
Yeah, well, it's really a question for an economist. And I think we all know that the sole function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable. That said, I think it is safe to say that we are going to have to pay for all the fiscal stimulus in some way, shape, or form. And inevitably, that is going to turn into or translate into some combination of higher tax rates at both the personal and the corporate levels. And that will probably also translate into reduced government investment into the economy as well.
We touched on this before about reserve funds, and Earl, you had always advised me about what to have on the side, and we did speak about it before, but that was all like theoretical. Now we're in the middle of an actual crisis. So does the theory hold up? Just curious on your take on that.
Well, this is the time for many people, especially the dentists I was talking about before, where you're actually using your emergency reserve. Ideally, you've had 3 to 6 months of your personal consumption set aside in some very low interest environment, a high interest savings account, some way quick and easy. However, given zero interest rates on bank accounts, a lot of professionals aren't thinking that's the right idea right now. So if you don't have that, what most of us have, and I know that banks have been very generous in offering lines of credit. If you have at least 6 months budget sitting aside available to you in a line of credit, that could be your emergency reserve. But remember, it's an emergency reserve. This is not for regular consumption when things are going okay. This is to get you through a very difficult patch.
So we're in the last minute or two of this webinar, and I'm going to throw the floor open to all three of you. If you had any closing comments or statements, or you saw some of the questions come in, if you wanted to respond to any of them, I'll leave it up to you.
Well, maybe I'll wrap it up quickly. Jeremy touched on a few of these, Ollie touched on them, but the critical. When was the last time you reviewed your will, your mandate? Do they still make sense? Pull it out, take a look at it. Are you sure you have the right insurance in place? Life insurance, disability insurance. Speak with a professional. Confirm that you have the right coverage, that it's what you need. Have you spoken to your family? Have you spoken to your parents about their situation? Have you made sure their stuff is in order? Most important, when was the last time you reviewed all your financial plans? A lot of us have a lot more time on our hands these days. We're not commuting as much. And some of us are not working as much. Given that extra time, take it to review your situation. Look at what you have. Decide, do you want to do this yourself? Ollie was talking about that before. Do you want to take care of yourself? Do you want to take the time and figure it out on your own? Or do you want to find a trusted financial advisor? Now's a good time to look for one.
Great. I wanted to thank the three of you for imparting upon my colleagues in both the medical and dental profession a lot of these pearls and wisdom this afternoon, things we really need in these most challenging and unsettling times. And I'm sure you provided some valuable information and comfort. So to Earl Kaplin and Olivier Brasseur and Jeremy Hampson, the team from Asante, thank you. I wanted to thank the McGill Alumni Association for allowing us to host and have this vehicle to exchange this information with you. If you have any pressing questions, I believe there is a slide up, or will be up, with contact information for any of our professionals, and you can please forward your questions to them, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer them. I myself, if you'd like to speak to me, I'm open to you. This is a volunteer thing that I do for McGill. I'm at benjamin.burko@mcgill.ca. And thank you once again, all of you, for your attendance and participation, and we look forward to dialoguing with you again sometime in the near future.